What are you looking at? Hello, welcome to Ellroy Reads. If you are baffled by my abrasive confrontational tone, it is because in today's episode we will be looking at Mickey Spillane and the Mike Hammer novels. Yes, these are confrontational and pop culture phenomena, these novels, and they were in their own way an influence on James Ellroy. Okay, so the novel I have picked is Kiss Me Deadly, which is the final novel in this volume of Mickey Spillane literature. So to give you some background, Mickey Spillane was born in New York in rather modest circumstances. His father was a bartender. During World War II, he served in the US Air Force as a pilot instructor. Then after the war, he wanted to carve a career for himself as a writer, and he would often say that he was a writer, not an author. His original big idea was for a comic strip character called Mike Danger. Anyway, that never went into production, and he remodeled Mike Danger as the private eye Mike Hammer. Now, the symbolism in the name, because in many ways Raymond Chandler's Philip Marlowe is this kind of Arthurian knight character, whereas Mike Hammer is a blunt instrument of revenge. He's very unsubtle. He's got this almost Old Testament morality in wreaking vengeance, at least, although he's quite keen on the opposite sex. Um, but he can be violent to them. He can be sexy to them. He's incredibly attractive to women, despite by his own admission in this first person narration that he's not physically handsome. In fact, he's quite ugly. It's like he wears the scars of his profession on his sleeve and on his face. But the women seem to be drawn to him. Okay, so if I can just go through the plot of Kiss Me Deadly, and I'll go through it, but very, very quickly because the plots are not particularly important to these novels. In my own view, it begins with Mike Hammer driving through Albany, and he nearly runs a woman off the road. He decides to give her a lift to make up for it. This is a very mysterious woman. They're chased by gangsters. The gangsters knock Mike Hammer unconscious. They torture the woman for information which she does not reveal, and then they're driven off the road off a cliff. Hammer survives. The woman has already died by this point. So Hammer begins to investigate. The woman's name was Bergertorn, and he finds out she has a roommate called Lily Carver, and Lily becomes the crux of the plot here because Hammer is very attracted to her at first, and that attraction may be seen in this very famous original cover by James Meese. So that's Lily and that's Hammer, and as you can see, Lily is about to start a striptease. This is a scene from the end of the novel, Hammer is the sort of guy who'd be more than willing to see a woman striptease. It certainly kind of tickles his primal urges, but the twist is that she's hideously burned underneath. In fact, her body is just kind of one walking piece of scarred flesh. All of her femininity is in her neck upwards. That's where her beauty is. And the novels have often been criticized for misogyny because Hammer equates her physical deformity with her moral deformity because she's been exposed as the villainess. And I've given away probably a significant spoiler, but Hammer will wreak violence on a woman just as happily as he will wreak it on a man. So the original Mike Hammer novels were a phenomenon. They were published by Dutton in hardback, but they sold in their millions in paperback. They were republished by Signet and were really part of the paperback boom, the post-war paperback boom. In fact, Kiss Me Deadly was the first private eye novel to reach the New York Times bestsellers list. Then, after a six-run Hammer novels, Spillane took a break from the series. He didn't write another, well, he didn't get another Hammer novel into print for 10 years. during which time films were made. A couple of them were kind of run of the mill and forgotten today, but the most famous one was of Kiss Me Deadly, and that was directed by Robert Aldrich, who was a great B-movie director of crime films who also did dramas and many other genres. Many classic films as well, like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane and Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, and attracted the attention of kind of highbrow critics. And he kind of, I suspect he may have hated the novel because he took a very, very experimental avant-garde approach to the novel. And the famous scene at the end with Lily he puts an incredible spin on it that's been kind of parodied in films like Pulp Fiction, whereas essentially Lily opens what turns out to kind of be Pandora's box and kind of unleashes hell on herself. But the burning and the symbolism about the woman burning and her beauty being deformed is all there, and it's a very interesting spin on it. Anyway, Mickey Spillane hated this film adaptation and ended up producing his own, in which he played Mike Hammer, and that was of The Girl Hunters. And that was his comeback book. However, once he brought back Mike Hammer after a 10-year hiatus, really some of that momentum had gone. Mike Hammer had just been so controversial for his misogyny, for his violence, for the fact that the novels were very, very political on the kind of conservative right, in that it was post-war America, it was the Red Scare, it was McCarthy hearings, and Mike Hammer is this fervent anti-communist. At first, the villains are mostly gangsters, and gradually they evolve into kind of broadly speaking communists in just every walk of life. So the novel really tapped into the kind of red paranoia of the time, and spoke to the public on a on a level, because Mickey Spillane would say, if you're popular, you're good, and he certainly was very, very popular. So James Ellroy discovered the books when he was a kid. He discovered them not long after that first run of 6 novels, which ended in 1952. Now, to give you some background, many of you will already know, if you watch the show, James Ellroy is kind of at least a biographical sketch of James Ellroy. But his parents had divorced. He moved to El Monte with his mother. His mother was murdered. That case was never solved. So he moved back to LA with his father. And his father was a flawed man in many respects. But one thing he was an avid reader. Now, when Ellroy talks about the novels his father read, they usually don't really align with what we think of James Ellroy today in terms of both his taste as a reader and also his output as a crime writer. In that his father was very much into kind of epic historical fiction, like the Count of Monte Cristo, and made James read a few of these novels, and he thought they were slog. But he did have the original 6-book set of the first 6 Mike Hammer novels. And at first he's like, you can read them when you're older, because these are very graphically violent and sexy novels. But eventually, either Armand, James Ellroy's father, relented, or at some point James just got hold of copies and he started reading them. And he didn't fully understand the plots, and I think he probably, blamed himself a little bit for that at the time. He wasn't to know that perhaps, plot-wise, Mickey Spillane wasn't the best at structure. Um, but he understood them on a primal level. He was becoming a very right-wing kid himself, and he'd eventually end up briefly in the American Nazi Party. But he understood the kind of post-war battle between communism and on the other side freedom in America. And he was very much the patriotic kid, and he hated communists, and he loved Mike Hammer for taking down communists left, right, and center. But he's also said that, again, on that primal level, he had him been mourning his mother. He'd been, frankly, in shock for a long time about what had happened. Also, a relieved shock, because his mother was the better parent of the two. He saw her as this terrible authoritarian, but she wasn't in some ways. She made him do his homework. She made him get to school on time. She made him, go to bed at a reasonable hour. The things parents should do. Although I should later I should say that I've spoken to Alroy's partners, but both the two women he married and also his longer term partners and even shorter term partners, and the women who were the closest to him very, very insistent that Jean Ellroy was a pretty bad mother and that she would abandon um, James, or Lee was his birth name, again and again to run off and have sex with men. But anyway, this is a bit of a tangent. She was definitely the more responsible parent of the two. And he felt Mike Hammer was a way for him to wreak revenge on his mother's killer. Because that's what Hammer did in a very, very uncomplicated way, is that his solution was violence. He wasn't held back by the law or any kind of nominal respect for the law, because anyone will tell you, first of all, James Ellroy, but many of the great writers he admired, like Ed McBain, famously said, the last time a private eye investigated a murder was never. The private eye construction in American literature is ludicrous, but at least Chandler had a little bit of kind of complication in terms of, like, say, Marlowe's relationship with the police. They're always running up against each other. Sometimes they're corrupt, sometimes they help him. Um, he lives with them, and he lives within the law. He just doesn't kill everybody he meets. Um, and Elroy loved the books on that primal level. I don't know how much he's revisited them over the years. I suspect very, very little. Um, Mike Hammer was so much of that kind of post-war era that that when Mickey Spillane revived him in the 60s, like, the moment had gone. There was a revival in the 1980s, and there has been periodic revivals, but never to the same extent. And Elroy could recall in vivid detail going on a date to see the 1982 movie I, the Jury, where Armand Assante played Mike Hammer, and then Stacy Keach was playing Mike Hammer on television throughout the 80s. Then, after Spillane died, his biggest literary admirer is Max Allan Collins, who's done a really good job about getting Mickey Spillane's unpublished and unfinished Mike Hammer manuscripts into print as novels with Holocaust Crime. And he's done a really, really good job at leading another revival of Mike Hammer. But there's a little twist here, because as you probably know if you're watching this show, I wrote James Ellroy's biography, Love Me, Face and Danger, The Life of James Ellroy, published by Bloomsbury. And I was very pleased to see it was nominated for an Edgar Award. And also nominated was Max Allan Collins' biography, which he co-wrote with James L. Traylor, of Mickey Spillane. And I didn't think anything of it. I'm sure that's absolutely fine book, as were the other um, books that were nominated. Two Edgar Allan Poe um, biographies, and very, very fine writers I was up against. Um, but Max Hancock said something on his website. He was very, very grumpy about my book. He said that the title was ridiculous, and that he knew he wasn't going to win this minute he saw Ellroy nominated, and he really doesn't like Ellroy. And he went on a rant, for want of a better word, and I'm not entirely sure why, other than he doesn't like Ellroy as a writer. But it came up in the comment thread. He's like, "Well, has he ever offended you?" He's like, "No, no. Ellroy's been actually quite civil in all my dealings with him." Anyway, Love Me First and Danger did win the Edgar, and, and Max comes for another very grumpy message on his website. But I've always admired Max. I think he's a great writer, and I was in a call with him because all the nominees in our panel, in fact, all the panels for the Edgars, all did a Zoom call each that was broadcast on YouTube, and it's still there if you want to check it out. And obviously, Max Ancons is the absolute goat when it comes to Mickey Spillane, not only as a scholar but also as a proponent of his work and someone who's really defended him. And which is why I find it kind of odd, because in some ways I feel, although Elroy's very fashionable now, I feel like maybe there's a sea change coming on, and I may be in a situation where I have to defend Elroy from increasingly political attacks. Um, I feel like it happened to Hemingway, it happened to Philip Roth, although perhaps more after they died. But as an academic who's the main focus of my work is James Ellroy, I can see that coming on. A few other Ellroy critics have said that they can see this coming further down the line. But anyway, there's a little bit of gossip for you, and certainly James Ellroy never said anything bad about Max to me. And James could be quite catty himself. He was quite happy to slag people off if he didn't like them. I suppose the literary world is quite small, and when you rub someone the wrong way, it tends to stick in your mind. But yeah, Mickey Spillane, the Mike Hammer novels, Kiss Me Deadly, I think is one of the best of the novels. It certainly inspired the best film. And Mickey Spillane's writing and Mike Hammer as a character were a big influence on James Ellroy as a kid. I think that influence kind of diluted, and James has explored his own themes, which every writer should. They shouldn't just be like a slave to their influences. But it'd be churlish not to pay tribute, not only to Mickey Spillane's great contribution to the genre, but also to Ellroy on a personal level. So do check out Kiss Me Deadly. I'll see you again for another episode of Ellroy Reads soon. Okay, bye bye.